And this is the fourth of 7 presentations and my first. So we'll start. And we'll start with prayer. Dear God in heaven, we are really grateful to be here today. As we enjoy each other's fellowship and the good food spiritually and physically that was prepared. We are greedy, Lord. And we want so much more. We ask that you will fill our hearts and minds. We're also grateful to be living in this time in Earth's history. Help us to not only understand external events, but our own internal events, where we are and what we should be doing as a movement. So direct our thoughts and words this afternoon. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so about 2 weekends ago, we had the Fiji camp meeting. And I gave 3 presentations there. And I'm not sure how many people are familiar with those. So no judgment. Can we have a show of hands, those that haven't watched those presentations? Yep, that's okay. Just this will be an extension of those presentations. So what we did was reviewed Daniel chapter 11. And the historical context associated with verse 16 and Sunday law. And we went from Daniel to the book of Revelation. To see if that history was in that book as well. Can anybody remember what chapter we went to? Josephine? Chapter 12. So we're going to review Revelation chapter 12 today. So we'll start with verses 1 and 2. And I'll read them in their entirety. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pained to be delivered. So we see a woman standing on the moon, clothed with the sun, and a crown of 12 stars. So help me now with the interpretation of the symbols. This woman represents who? The church? What church? Okay. So Molly says Ephesus. So one of the 7 churches is God's church. And we're going to get a description of God's church at a particular time in history. And Molly has said this is the Ephesus dispensation. So this is Ephesus. And what is a characteristic of the church? As described in the symbols. Clothed with the sun. The sun being? The light of what? The full light of the gospel. Because what has she been standing on up until Ephesus? The moon. So moon is reflected light. And can we give that reflected light some names? Old Testament, Mosaic dispensation, and the sun is the full light of the gospel. And these stars on the crown. Teachers. What do these teachers represent? Organisation. So I'll write teachers. Organisation. So we know if we go to Revelation 2 and 3, how many churches does God have? 7 churches is the answer.
7 churches, sorry.
So that was a trick question. and you fell for it. God has one church that goes through 7 different phases. And what we're looking at here is the first phase of the Christian dispensation. So if we've got a first phase of a Christian dispensation, what else must we have? The last phase of the previous dispensation. And when I'm using the word dispensation, I realise it's probably using it differently than what we were yesterday. Because the Mosaic dispensation covers a large period of time. So this is a great wonder seen in heaven. And where did we place this heaven? How many heavens are there? And we are in the... Then we're in the second heaven. And that's going to become important because there's another symbol seen in the second heaven. A great red dragon with a tail. And that tail is going to take some stars out of heaven. So where did the stars belong? Stars belong in the second heaven. That tail's not long enough to reach up into the first heaven. These stars just floating around in the sky somewhere. Where are these stars? So on the crown on the church of the previous dispensation. And what's the difference between the two churches? What doesn't church 1 have that church 2 has? Rachel says the full light of the gospel. It relies on that reflected light of the Mosaic of the moon of the Mosaic dispensation. So when we looked at that a couple of weeks ago, we saw that Uriah Smith explains that this tail is taking away 1/3 of the stars of this organisation. Which represented what? The kings. So this is verse 16 of Daniel chapter 11. So the organization of the previous church was threefold. Kings and who? Priests and the Sanhedrin. So this is when Pompey stands in the glorious land. And we see no more kings are ruling Judea. He absolves their monarchy. But the church still survives. What's going to happen is there's going to be a transition in organization. And when the man-child is born, we will see the full light of the gospel rise. So what was one of the problem that we had with church number 2 here? How it's symbolized in Revelation 12.
Just like
Yeah. So Catherine says that if we mark Ephesus at beginning at 4 BC, when this mature woman who's ready to give birth delivers the man-child, that we can't see 12 disciples. You can't see full organization. Remember, the number 12 means perfect organization. And we could give 4 BC another name. Time of the end. At the time of the end, we should have perfect organization. And Uriah Smith gave us an out. And explained it with one word. Anybody? It's okay. It's prolepsis. It was on the tip of your tongue, wasn't it?
It was a word.
Yeah. Okay, so this is page 545.3. Of Daniel and Revelation. Where Smith says that by understanding how a prolepsis works, the church can be represented as fully organized before the man-child Christ appears on the scene. Oops. Hide it under here. It's a figure of speech. An example of a prolepsis is the saying, he's like a dead man walking. The man isn't dead yet, but he may as well be. Okay, so Ephesus is the first of 7 periods of the Christian dispensation. They're 7 distinct periods. When do you think that this church was fully organized? Let me ask another question. Why would it need to be fully organized? What was its purpose?
Take the gospel.
Josephine?
Take the gospel to the world.
Josephine says to take the gospel to the world. And the gospel being its core doctrines and beliefs. So when we think of doctrines and we think of an organization that is there to protect them and to share them, what are the terms used in the book of Daniel? Catherine? The city and the sanctuary. So this symbol of the woman represents in its entirety the city and the sanctuary. That the 4th kingdom of Bible prophecy wants to tread down. So we can see the doctrines in the moon and in the sun. We can call one type and the other antitype. Organization we can see in that crown with the 12 stars. So it's important that this church gets organized. It's a protection for its ideology. Any thoughts of when we would see the church fully organized? Rachel says Pentecost. Any reason for Pentecost?
Being one core.
Because the organisation is of one accord. Yeah. Can you give me a year? 31 BC. So what else happens in 31 BC? Crucifixion of Christ. If you go back to Revelation 12, what verse would give us 31 BC? 31 AD. Thank you. That's why I keep you. Have a quick squeeze. I want to see 31 BC in Revelation 12. So Molly says verse 5. Because we've got a child that gets caught up unto God and to the first throne in the first heaven. So what has had to happen for that child to go to heaven? So the crucifixion. And then you've got the ascension, as you said. And you've got Pentecost. So all there in 31 BC is AD. It's a very important time. So that man-child that's born in 4 BC, it's now gone to the first heaven. And who's left in the second heaven? They're kind of left on their own. So Jesus can't go unless that church is organised. And he spent 3.5 years in preparation to leave. Because when he gets to the first heaven, what's he going to start doing? Come on, you good Seventh-day Adventists. There's going to be a work in the heavenly sanctuary. So the holy place ministry is going to begin. So we're seeing a change in the first heaven. We're seeing a change in what is happening in the first heaven. So if we consider 31 BC, AD, oh, shoot me now. We noted the crucifixion. Type meets antitype. The ascension. Pentecost. And I would suggest that 3.5 years of Christ's ministry has completed the organization of the church. Remember, we're not talking about people, individuals, when we're talking about organization. If you take your minds back to John chapter 13, it's Jesus's last night with the disciples before his death. And he's going to set up an ordinance. What parable is he going to share with the disciples? Yes. Gloria says foot washing, which is going to teach the disciples service. Up until that point, what were they arguing about? Rachel. Who's going to be the greatest? And Jesus is going to, who is greatest? Because he that is greatest among you, let him be your servant. So Jesus did exactly what he had to do. Nobody else in that room was qualified to wash a person's foot. And we see the penny drop with the disciples. And he'll give them a new commandment. What's the new commandment? Love one another as I have loved you. Was that new? Was Jesus a liar? So was it new? So it's new. So what's the old commandment? Treat others as you want to be treated. And the new commandment is? Treat others better than you would treat yourself. So I've got John 13, 14. Jesus' last words to his disciples in the upper room. John 15, John 16. Jesus' last words as they walk to Gethsemane. And John 17 is his prayer for his church. So a lot of chapters, a lot of conversation, preparing the disciples for him leaving. for the man-child ascending to the throne. A familiar verse, if you go to John 14, and we'll read the first 3 verses. Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In God's house are many mansions. If it weren't so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. So the disciples are obviously nervous. Jesus' demeanor has changed. They can sense something bad's going to happen. So Jesus is comforting them. Says, I'm going to go away. I'm going to do a work, but I'm going to return. What's the work that Jesus is going to do while he's away? Is he going to be building mansions? Why is he telling the disciples that he's going to go and build some dwellings in the first heaven?
Thought it was happening to the marriage customs.
So Catherine is saying, suggesting that this is about the marriage customs of the day. That the husband is preparing to receive the bride. Why didn't he just explain his high priestly ministry? Now, first I'm going to go to the most holy place, to the holy place, then I'm going to go to the most holy place, and this is going to be this Day of Atonement. So Catherine is saying they weren't ready for this yet. They're in no frame of mind to receive all that light. In fact, it's going to take years before Paul's going to come and be able to explain that to everybody. And here we get an example of how God can give information that's suitable for the time and place. And the greater light of the gospel is still yet to explain the Mosaic dispensation. and the necessity of having that lesser light in order to explain the greater light. So this was all in, even though we see the church fully organized here, because now Jesus can leave, even though he said, I'll always be with you, there's still more light to come. But take note, we're marking full organization when Christ's heavenly ministry begins. What happens in heaven has its counterpart on what happens on earth, and vice versa. So this is Ephesus. And we know that there's going to be 7 periods of this Christian dispensation. Ephesus. So if we go to a Revelation chapter 2, so there's going to be a message sent to this church, because there's a lot to like about this church. And the message goes to the angel of the church. What do these angels represent? The leaders, the ministers, the teachers. So the organization of this church. And God's going to tell them what they're doing right, but going to give them a warning. So what's the warning that's given to Ephesus? That they've left their first love. So what's the first love of Ephesus? What are they in danger of leaving? So John has suggested to love one another as I have loved you. So and when were they told that? We noted that in 31 BC. AD. It's too late now. It's done. You just have to interpret me. So we mark Ephesus beginning at 4 BC. What's going to begin that church, that rising up of this movement? John the Baptist, says Graham. Yeah, before John. Prophecy. And where would we mark prophetic message back in the beginning? So if prophecy raises this movement, where do we see it in 4 BC? Graham? Zacharias? Am I getting that right? So there's the prophecy of Zacharias. I'm not sure if this is correct spelling. John the Baptist's dad. Anywhere else? Isaiah isn't alive in 4 BC. Anna? Simon or Simeon? Yeah? Wise men? There are wise men that recognize the wonders in heaven. They're studying the signs of the times. They're reading the books of Balaam. And they've picked up an Old Testament. And they see a wonder in heaven. And they recognize that a new kingdom has started. And there are various other witnesses to that. James?
I don't know if the vehicle was the choice that they married themselves.
So
Joseph and
the angels that come to Mary. Yeah. So we have various angel visitations to Mary, to Elizabeth, and to shepherds. So the first love of Ephesus is an understanding of prophecy. Knowing where they are in history. Ephesus runs for about 100 years. And they're in danger of losing that first love. That first love is not only based on Isaiah, as Molly suggested, and various other Old Testament prophets. But the 70 weeks of Daniel chapter 9 need to be understood. And we know that there are people studying those prophecies intently. And towards the end of the era of that church, that intensity is waning. So here we've got our woman. Sorry to all women out there. Okay. And then we've got other phases. So Ephesus becomes Smyrna. Going to go through a period of persecution. Which they largely bring upon themselves. So now that they'll begin to compromise to get out of the persecution. They will go into captivity. And where do we see that captivity in Revelation chapter 12? Couple of verses. James? James says 13 and 14. So 13, the dragon is going to persecute the woman. And we see that beginning in the church of Smyrna. By the time we get to 14, the woman has to go into hiding. The church goes into the wilderness for times, and half a time. $1,260 years. Now, in the book of Revelation, when you see the number 7, it usually has, and there's lots of 7s in Revelation. There's a particular characteristic that the number 7 has. John?
Perfection.
So that's what the number 7 means.
It's usually 3 and 4.
Yeah, a 4 and a 7. So it gets split into number 4 and number 3. So the first 4 churches are consecutive. But if I can draw it this way, the next 3 churches can be seen as a contemporary. So we'll see Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. So what happens to the church in the time of Thyatira? So that's a badly worded question. Let me try again. what is happening to Thyatira? What is Thyatira in danger of? Brendan says being wiped out. Any other thoughts, Josephine? Yes. So what's Thyatira in danger of, Josephine? What's Jezebel going to do? Influence them. What are the two words used in Revelation chapter 2, Graham? Teach and seduce. Okay, so at the end of 1260, we come to 1798. And who's Sardis? So Ephesus is God's church. Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, God's church. Sardis, God's church. Revelation 17 calls the Protestants what? The daughters. Daughters of the woman. So if you're a daughter of a woman, and that woman is Babylon, what are the daughters? Can God's church ever be Babylon? No. So that's vow number 15. So whoever Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea is, we know that none of them are Babylon. But they represent God's church in a particular phase of that historical time. If you're still in Revelation 12, why isn't Thyatira wiped out during the 1260? Why doesn't Jezebel have total influence over that church? The earth helps the woman. So what's the earth? Geography, says Brendan. So if we went to Revelation 13, and we brought this down to 1798, and we know that John looks one direction and he sees the sea. And he looks the other direction, what's he going to see? The earth. So out of this sea comes a beast. Out of this sea comes a beast. Out of this earth comes a beast. What helps the woman? The beast or the earth? So it's the geography that helps the woman. That this movement that's been in hiding for 1260 years is able to find a place of refuge. It's able to move from the old world to the new world. So the church has moved from Thyatira. Sorry, the Thyatira church is going to go into its Sardis period. And this is this movement that has now found a place where it can have refuge. So we get to, it goes through has three different experiences. That can overlap each other. Does anybody remember where we note Philadelphia? What part of Millerite history? Because Millerite history starts in 1798.
onwards.
1844 onwards, suggests Brendan. Brendan suggests 1844 onwards for a bit.
1840 to 44.
John says 1840 to 1844. Why do you say 1840 to 1844?
It was when the three angels' messages were being preached.
Because that's when the three angels' messages were being preached.
And God was gathering his people at that time, after 1844.
And God was gathering his people, their people.
After 18.
How do we explain that history? What's that nice little phrase that Ellen White uses for 1840 to 1844? Seven Thunders isn't what I'm looking for, but it. Catherine? A glorious manifestation of the power. A glorious manifestation of the power of God. Where do we see that in the book of Revelation?
Philadelphia. The Church of Philadelphia.
Well, yeah, I'm looking for the period where we would see Philadelphia. From the book of Revelation. Give me a chapter.
Revelation 10.
Sorry, I can't hear when they're... Go.
Revelation 10.
Revelation 10. When the mighty angel comes down. So it's a relatively short period of time, 40 to 44. And some might even mark it from July 44 to October 44. I wouldn't argue with either. So, and then the church goes into its Laodicean phase. Then also what we did last week, I'll draw it down here, is we saw that there are 7 phases of God's church in the Mosaic dispensation. So Ephesus, when do we mark Ephesus for the Old Testament? Moses, when they came out of Egypt. Did they come out fully organized? Yes. Yeah, we could see a prolepsis there. That the DNA for organization was in those 12 tribes as they came out of Egypt. And it would take time before you could see that fully manifested. Right, Moses, and then they got persecuted during what time? Judges. They compromised during what time? And they were influenced by Babylon during what time? Okay, 70 years. And then we're going to see Sardis, Philadelphia. Philadelphia doesn't last all that long either, but I'll just write it here. And the Laodicean period of this church. So here you've got a church standing on the moon. And down here, you've got a church standing on a moon. So one of the words that phrases that have been used to describe this church. Is a good woman. Does that good woman ever turn bad? Does the woman remain good? Molly says no. So when would you mark the church turning bad? (1863). And why would you say 1863?
They denied the child.
They denied the charts. So you're going up into this history here. You're taking us up here. That somewhere in this history, God's church turns bad. They become Laodicea in 1850. So part of this exercise is to recognize, to revise our understanding of these 7 phases. And that there is a major change in God's church from the old dispensation to the new. But also, how do we view the church of the previous dispensation? So when, I think on the board, maybe it was last night, we talked about the Alpha and Omega. And how they can be different, but also similar. What was Ephesus' first love? Understanding prophecy. They studied the prophetic messages so they knew where they were and who they were in history. When we get to the end of these 7 phases, 7 periods, what's Laodicea's problem? Why is it lukewarm? It has no love for the prophetic message. It has no idea of time. And just as Marie said, they've rejected the charts. So the tools that they could use to know when they are in time have been rejected. So then when we go back into this history, the Old Testament history, we see the old church, not only do they don't understand prophecy, they don't want to understand prophecy. When the wise men went to Jerusalem to see where the king man-child was going to be born, who's the only person that's interested? Herod. The opposition king. And so Laodicea, prior to, let's see if I can just draw this here. We'll bring this down. And we'll draw another Ephesus. Mark that as 1989. And this Ephesus is a movement of success. Is a movement of success. So what are we never going? So what is this movement never going to lose? It must never lose a love of prophecy. Whatever that moon looks like, we know the reflected light is more than the Old Testament. And includes the New Testament, Millerite history, and the spirit of prophecy. So we've got 2 Laodiceas and 2 Ephesus, and all the churches in between. All the churches in between are they good or are they bad? Is that an answer? So they've all got issues, except Philadelphia. So they've all got warnings that are relevant to the time period they're living in. But they've all got messengers, angels, ministers. So there is organization to give that warning. So I'd just like to suggest to you that this woman is always good. Thyatira is good. just as much as Laodicea is the good church. The Laodicea is flawed. It is a flawed church. It has issues. But while it has the moon under its feet and the sun behind it, while it contains all the core doctrines, all those that sanctuary understanding, it is the only church that has the true understanding of Christ's heavenly ministry. That it is a good church. But there comes a time in history when a new phase has to be entered into, because I can hear you. You can't hear me? Okay. We've left a wilderness time period. The 126. And now we have to find our first love. Which will begin where? Yeah, 1989. Where's our first love going to begin? Not a time, but a place, a book. Daniel 11, 40 to 45. And this movement will be a success because this movement will hold on to its first love. And wonder at every waymark and history that has brought us to today. And was it fully organized in 1989? Yes. By the figure of a prolepsis. But when did that perfect organization become evident? (2016). Why 2016? Ordination. I heard another 2024. Catherine says 2024. And why would you mark 2024? Can you explain?
So Ephesus was organised at 31 AD. And so we would apply that to somebody.
So we're applying 31 AD to 2024. What happened in heaven in 31 AD? Christ began his high priestly ministry. And in 2024, the judgment of the living begins. So 2024 is marking a particular event happening in first heaven. That we can see by the eye of faith when we combine prophecy with external events. And recognize where we are in Earth's history. So I think we've run out of time. But I just want to note in closing that when we say the good woman here, I should say a good woman. Because we talk about another good woman, which is not this good woman. What's the other good woman that we sometimes use that description for? The sixth kingdom. This good woman here is not the sixth kingdom of Bible prophecy at any period of time. So when we see Ephesus, the movement of Ephesus pulled out of Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea, where else do we see that in Bible prophecy? Catherine says Daniel 2. So what we're seeing is a stone being pulled out of a mountain. That mountain is not the image. And this is, I guess, what we learn from vow number 15. That the church of God can never be Babylon. There are some quotes, but we might leave that for the next time. So what we've done today is we've compared the church that existed before the Ephesus of 4 BC. And the church that existed before this movement. And that they are God's church, or were God's church. That they hold and protected the core beliefs. That their issues became so great that there had to be a change in that church. The change is in the organization. The moon and the sun doesn't change. Only in that the light intensifies. And that light is an understanding of prophecy so that we can understand what is happening for us in the first heaven. Salvation is being played out on this earth heaven. Is the problem my end? Okay. So prophecy allows us to see where we are in time. So that we can understand where we are in the plan of salvation. As it plays out in heaven and on earth. So on that note, we won't push the internet any further. We'll close in prayer. Dear God in heaven, we stand in awe of how you have been teaching your church through the ages. All these wonderful symbols with their meanings. That your word of prophecy, it has brought a people to life. We know that this movement will never have a name, that it is alive but dead. That this movement will never be lukewarm on prophecy. We pray that the same would be true for us as individuals. So we ask that you would be with us for the remainder of the Sabbath. We ask in Jesus' name, amen.